Anin, Adishnaka Sanimki, Makade Maingandorum, Odawa, Anishinaabe. My name is Thunder, and I belong to the Black Wolf clan of the Odawa people, who are part of the people of the Great Lakes, the first people. My English name is John Bailey, and glad to be here today. And this land we're sitting on is a property I was born on. My father was born here as well. And we, as a family, still retain this land. My brother lives just down the road a bit. So I know you're talking about Asemaa, or tobacco, and its use. One of the things that we have found with Asemaa, or tobacco, is that when it was given to us by our Creator. And of course, Nanabuju, our man of great spirit and strength, was the first to use it. And what it's used for is to send prayers, that the smoke carries these prayers outward. And we never, in more modern times I should say, we don't use just plain tobacco. Many people do, and that's all right. But a lot of it we like to mix, and I have a mixture here in this little pipe. It's Asemaa, cedar, sage, and sweetgrass. I make that myself. And my grandparents, particularly my granddad, taught us to burn tobacco at certain times, such as when a storm comes, especially when you hear the thunders, the grandfathers they call them, bringers of light. That's when you burn the tobacco and you pray, and you ask for that the ground gets the water it needs. It gets the energy from those grandfathers so plants will grow. And so when I was growing up, my grandma I'd see her sometimes storm come, and she'd take tobacco and open the wood stove and throw it in the wood stove and put the lid back on. And then the evening when my grandpa would, at the end of the day, if he decided to smoke, he would take his pipe, and I never, when you're growing up as a kid, you'd watch. Finally, I caught on. I said, wow, look at him. He's puffed 7 times. Then when he's through puffing, then he'd sit there and carry on a conversation or whatever he had in mind for that evening. But that 7 puffs that he took was for the 7 directions, or the 7 grandfathers. The sacred directions, people usually say 4, but we have 7. And the first direction, of course, is the east, and that's where we got tobacco from. We get cedar from the south, sage from the west, and sweetgrass from the north. And those are the 4 that go in there. Some people use red willow, which you can. Some people use whatever they prefer themselves. But the use of it was not everyday or recreational. It was for spiritual. And I think, in modern times, we've all gotten away from that. I mean, with the proliferation of tobacco companies and their packaging and that kind of thing, we've lost sight of what tobacco is about. And it isn't just tobacco we've lost sight of. There are other things that everyone practices, but they really don't know what their meaning is. For instance, Halloween. Halloween is a trivialization of a sacred day around the world. Now in Mexico they celebrate it, and Feast of the Dead they call it. Up here we have the same thing. But they've taken that holiday where you worship your ancestors and kind of made it into a kid's holiday. And I think they need to return to the seriousness of it, of respecting your ancestors. Because in our way, we're taught that if you respect your ancestors, you bring honor to them. And when you bring honor to your ancestors, you bring honor to your community, you bring honor to your family, and you bring honor to yourself. Then the end of that is, if you bring honor to yourself, you bring honor to your family, And if you bring honor to the family, you bring honor to the community. And if you bring honor to the community, you bring honor to your ancestors. So it's a complete cycle of understanding. And that's really to teach us that mental balance long term. To keep in mind that we're only here in a temporary sense as people. And so if you keep these things sacred, you ensure an existence and continuation of your people. And so it's very difficult sometimes, I know, you go to a gathering. Today I was handed tobacco in a pouch, so I save that and use it, mix it. A lot of times I'll go to a jingtamak or a powwow and they give you a cigarette. And you go, well, all right, I'll accept it. It's tobacco. I take off the filter, then I'll smoke it. Just puff on it. But when I puff on it, I'm saying a prayer. Maybe to the casual observer you don't see that, but I'll puff on it and recognize our grandfather, the sun, grandmother, moon, and keep those thoughts in my head, because that's where we make that connection. Again, that smoke goes up, carries our prayers. And maybe if we're lucky, an eagle will come by and take some of that smoke and take it even higher, quicker. That's what we look for. So if you don't mind, I'll just light this, and it has a calming effect too. If you can light them. A lot of people talk about pipes. I asked my grandpa about it. Oh, he said, I've used a wooden pipe. He said wooden pipe is good. For ceremonies, they use redstone or bloodstone. I have one that you use, and we have these pipes that we use for ceremonies. But every day, and you make your tobacco offering, they say in the morning and the evening. And a lot of times the old timers, their offering was just sit and smoke. And that served me well, because my grandpa, he always smoked at the end of the day. Nothing during the day. And when he did, as I mentioned, 7 puffs. And as a young man in this county, it was such that everybody drank. And so I started out early in life. Really drank alcohol. But when I wanted to quit, I did it by sitting in my backyard and watching the sunset. And imitate my grandpa. He'd think about what he did that day. Maybe I should have done it this way. Maybe tomorrow I'll do it this way. That kind of thing. And so I took that time, that sacred time in the day, to think about how I could change things within myself, make myself healthier. So I was able to put alcohol away. Sometime before that, I was a cigarette smoker too, and I put that away. And people said, well, who'd you get to help? I said, I did it myself. Nicotine addiction, alcohol the same way. I took care of it myself. Because we can ask for programs and we can look for things, but it's within your own self to find that courage to admit you got a problem. And to admit that your weakness has caused the problem. So your personal strength can alleviate the problem. And it isn't just with alcohol or nicotine. It's with everything. I talked to some kids about abuse. They know what it's about, they understand that. But I said, look at it another way. Chemical abuse. Okay, we understand that too. I said, yeah, but what about the 500-pound lady in the circus who eats 2 chocolate cakes a day? That's abuse. What about the person that sits and overeats? That's abuse. It's chemical addiction. Or a person that puts salt on everything, on bacon, on potato chips, on pickled bologna. That's abuse. And so you have to look at things in a way that you say, well, my best way is to try to find the middle. So I got balance on each side. Because there's a negative and a positive to everything. It's like emotion. Alcoholism, addictions, that gets you into trouble because of our ego, our self-centeredness. So that's negative. But if you take that same emotion and make it a positive, it could be, well, I don't feel good unless I'm helping somebody. I don't feel good until I reach out and help. Well, it's the same emotion, but that's the positive side. So you learn to look at the positive and the negative, and then try to hit that balance in between. You know, this way, that way, a little bit. You know, it's like driving a car. Well, the speed limit on the expressway is 70, so I got to go 80 or 90. And when you measure the time you've gained, you don't gain all that much time. And so you learn to say, well, I've got to be a little temperate here. I could hurt somebody by going too fast. I can hurt somebody on the expressway by going too slow. So you just try to keep finding that balance. And I would say it's constant. You got to remind yourself all the time. Because you swing out too far one way or the other. Anger is one of them. Anger is difficult. And anger is an addiction. Because the adrenaline rush you get from it. And some people are able to use anger in a positive way. All right, I'm angry about the world. I'm angry the way I've been racially treated. I'm angry about the way the school system mistreats people. So you say, well, can you live with that anger? You can live with it all your life. And when I was a teenager, I tried to. And so my dad told me, he said, if you're going to hit somebody who's racial, then you better get a big glove and stand in one place and let the whole world go by you the rest of your life. Because that's what it'll take. So in that process of learning, I learned to take anger and channel it into productive energy, the positive side. I'll get involved in civil rights. I'll get involved in any group that is against racism. I'll look at children and say, I don't want to teach them racism. And so you look at it in that way. And in that process, what happens is you begin to notice physical change first. And after a while, you notice the mental change, the change to feel good. And when you do that, your habits become more tempered. I think we're all of us, we're all a product of our addictions. That's what dictates how we live, what we strive for. But if we can understand that's what it does to us, then we can modify it. And you become healthy, you become stronger in that process. And so looking at Asemaa, for instance, and saying, I'm not going to abuse it. I'm not going to make my ancestors ashamed of my use of it. I'm going to make my community proud that I can be an example that I don't abuse it. And then my family feels it, and then I feel it. So when you run it kind of in that sequence in order, you begin to see what they mean by walking in balance, walking in harmony, and walking in beauty. That even governs your life too, is, well, am I going to stop here and eat? No, there's smoking in there. Well, I'll go to a place where there's non-smoking. And I can smell my food. I can taste my food. And when I leave, I don't have to air out my clothes. So looking at what we do is things that we are learned, we're taught. It's like my parents, they're product of the Depression, but reached the young adulthood, World War II. In every movie you watch that came out of Hollywood, everybody's smoking a cigarette. And the soldiers out in the field were given cigarettes, stacks of them. And so many men that went off to the military came back addicted to nicotine. Now, some of them never smoked before till they got in the Army. And then they were given cigarettes. So everybody does it. Alcohol's the same thing. You look at the ads that used to be prevalent. Oh man, it just makes you tough, makes you handsome. The women are beautiful. They feel that way. And like that song says, everybody gets better looking at closing time. Well, your senses are greatly distorted by that time. So when you look at what we do to ourselves, a lot of it is things that we can get control of, but our presentation and what we learned is what we don't control. You can turn off a television or close a book or choose not to look at a magazine where this advertising is, but you'll find it everywhere we go. Cereal companies wanting to sell their product do a lot of cartoon characters, and then they start showing young kids, and so the kids, I want that cereal. Some of it's good for them. A lot of it's bad because it's sugar. You look at what we eat, fast foods. Well, you might want to eat some fast food sometime. That's good. You're hungry. But don't make it a habit of it. A lot of our young people today, if it weren't for fast food or takeout, the young kids wouldn't have supper. Because a lot of times there's two people working. And they might get tired, I don't want to cook. Well, let's call for something, or let's go pick up something. And pretty soon they're teaching that child that habit. And pretty soon we've got massive health problems in America with obesity because of the fat the kids are getting in those various foods. And so you have to learn to temper that, use a little wisdom, some balance, that walking in harmony. Yeah, you go one way or the other. And you touch both sides. There are times, you get angry and you shouldn't, and you realize it. So okay, I got to straighten that out. I got to behave a little differently. But a lot of times, our emotions are based on what we're putting in us, what we're eating. Too much sugar, too much salt, too much of anything is not good. And so you learn to do that. It's like this nice hot coffee on a chilly day. Say, okay, my wife knows that she can't drink coffee after 6 or 7 o'clock. She can't sleep. Well, I'm fortunate. I can drink coffee and go to sleep. Doesn't affect me that way. But I also know that when I'm done drinking it in the morning, I want to go the whole day without drinking it again in the evening. Because that's how I learned to drink coffee. We had coffee for breakfast, tea at lunch, tea at supper, and then if you had dessert in the evening, you had coffee with it. But we didn't have coffee all day long like you do now. There's coffee places everywhere you look, and a strong coffee. And the stronger you drink it, the stronger you want it. It gets you into a cycle that's a little hard to break sometimes. And so I was kind of into that where I worked, everyone drank coffee all day. And I realized what I was doing. So I said, no, I'm down to 1 cup in the morning, 1 cup in the evening. So I went like that for a long time because I knew I got addicted to it in a sense. And same way with one of the Indian people's favorite food. Someone asked, what kind of food do Indians eat? Oh, I said, we have potato chips, hot dogs, hamburgers, potato salad, baked beans, stuff like that. And Indian people, we're proud of the fact that we like to have potato every time we eat. But you have to be careful of how you're taking that potato. Too much gravy or too much butter isn't healthy either. So you look at those things that are gifts from the Creator, and you say, well, I can't abuse that. I have to modify and be in control of this. And so it might not look like it, but I used to be very heavy, and I've lost weight just because of modifying how I eat and different things. Years ago, you used to go buy a bottle of pop, and you drink that pop, and you say, well, tastes pretty good. How much sugar's in it? Now you buy a bottle of pop, and you realize that they've tripled the sugar value in it. 41 grams of sugar in 12 ounces, and years ago used to be considerably less. And now they've taken sugar out of it and put in artificial sweeteners. Our bodies over time learn to handle sugar and dissolve it. But our bodies haven't quite genetically mutated enough for us to process that new kind of sugar. And so you see an increase in diabetes. Not just for a long time it was natives. Now it's everybody. It's everybody. It's like addictions, for instance. In this country, there are a lot of people who smoke marijuana. Well, that's a minority problem. It's a black problem. It's a minority, a Mexican problem. Well, when that problem hit the white suburbs, then it became an issue, something we have to take care of. Our children are being destroyed. No one was concerned about children before that. And so people are now becoming more and more aware of these things that were foisted upon small groups throughout the country. And now they're beginning to see this across the board. And it's simply because of human beings with our chemicals, we're constantly mutating. For instance, the first human being that was able to take lactase and put it in their genetic code and tolerate milk products, they begin to dominate over those people who could not tolerate milk products. The people who could tolerate milk, their populations exploded because of the health factor that was derived from it. Stronger bones, stronger teeth, all those positive things that are with milk. But those who couldn't tolerate it, their health never improved. You had bad teeth and bad bones, that kind of thing. And so you can see back in time when that occurred, a million years ago or however long it was, and how as humans we're constantly mutating our genetic codes. We're changing them. Right now we can identify ourselves, race, color, that kind of thing. But again, we've intermarried throughout the world that if you want to find somebody's genetic base, you're going to have to start doing DNA testing, because we're all going to morph into one kind of a human being. Our colors may vary somewhat, but for instance, our son, he is Odawa, Ojibwe, Norwegian with a touch of French. And so when you look at him, he's an international human being. I'm Odawa and Ojibwe and a little bit of French. I jokingly tell people I'm just a little bit of French, but not enough to be ashamed of it, and then laugh because you are what you are. And so when you find yourself in that situation, you have to honor those bloodlines that create you. And I've seen people from different communities who are of mixed blood, but yet they deny one part of their existence over another. And I've had to ask some people one time or another, which part of you do you hate? If you hate white people, for instance, which part of you do you hate? Because I know you're part white. Which part of you do you hate because you're part black? And so on and so forth. And again, it's getting that middle ground and trying to find that balance of where you're going and understanding who you are and what you are. And once you get to that point, you will begin to see a difference in your life. For young people, I know I had a hard time in school, but once I got out of the influence of school, and once I realized education as a tool was up to me to take, well, I went to school and I didn't have any trouble. It was easy. And the fact is, I worked full time and I went to college full time. And I had a good grade point average. But some of the teachers I had, they kind of said, well, you better learn to work as a carpenter or work with your hands. not knowing the intellect it takes to be a carpenter. I mean, the math is tremendous. Building something simple. And so if you're going to remain healthy and live a healthy lifestyle, it is tied into what you eat. You are what you eat. It's tied into how you're going to use those products. Are you going to be addicted to it and abuse it? Or are you going to use it like a craftsman with a tool and use it wisely so you don't dull it or blunt it or even break it? And growing up here on this property, on this farm, I realized it later in life that my grandparents had given me so many lessons without it being like a student and teacher. It was, here's knowledge. Here's how you use it. Now it's up to you to use it properly. Even when I got to be an adult, that happened. I was involved with the civil rights movement, the black civil rights movement, and then as we as natives began to coalesce, and we did take a lot from the black movement. We had our Indian movement. So I'd come home and was talking to my grandpa, and I was basically referring to the policies of the United States and the white government. And, your rhetoric gets to you, and your ego gets bigger, and pretty soon, you're almost like what do they say, a campaign like a Southern Democrat, And so I was using white pretty loosely. And so before I left, he told me about when our house burned and who built it. Mr. Skinner and Mr. Fortine, Oakleys and the Ely's and the Brzezowskis and so on and so forth. Well, there was one black family in there, a Skinner family, and of course Brzezowski being Polish. And I realized halfway back to Flint that what he was telling me, so I certainly changed my rhetoric immediately because I knew I'd offended him and probably hurt his feelings. So I said, well, can't do that. So you get these lessons people tell you. And so if you go through life and you think about all the gifts the Creator has given us, and as we as recipients of those gifts then should be obligated to make sure those gifts are handled properly and that we use them properly. And if we do that, again, it's like, say, you bring honor to ourselves. We bring honor to family, community, and our ancestors. And we talk about all these things that we're responsible for. We're guardians of Mother Earth. And we're guardians of the future. As our ancestors in the past said it so that when my generation came, we had certain gifts. And now I'm responsible for 7 generations from where I sit. And I better make sure that if the Creator put 4 races of man upon earth, the 4 colors of man, then my responsibility is to ensure that, sure, we'll have some personal differences there, but to ensure that we honor that we honor black people, the Asian people, the white people, in us. And you'll find that in the process of trying to figure out what our differences are, we come down to the point where we find that the differences might be geographic. Differences might be in the food that we can bring out of the earth. But when we talk about our emotion, our intellect, all of those things that we hold dear and sacred, family, relatives, friends, it's that same no matter who you are, no matter what race, color, or creed you might be. It's stay in balance and harmony and to honor that. And it is difficult, I know at times, to turn around and you might have had a bad incident with a group of people, and so at the moment your emotion's going to say all those people are bad. But then you realize that no, there are some in every race that are bad. There are some people that are going to be racist in nature, no matter what you do. I've often said that a lot of times, and it's changed around the area I live in, but at one time I often said that if Jesus Christ came back to northern Michigan, he'd have a hard time getting something to eat someplace. because the color of his skin would be. So you run into that. When I grew up around here in Traverse City too, there was a lot of racism. My father and I were refused service when I was 15. And my dad had to walk away from that because if he hadn't, he'd been arrested. It was Cherry Festival time, and if you ate a piece of pie, they'd give you a tag, and you wore that tag, and then the mock police wouldn't take you up in the center stage, and you had to pay 50 cents or $1 to get out. And I'll tell you, when we left there without those tags, I prayed all the way to the car that they wouldn't stop us. Because my dad was a professional boxer, and he kind of short-tempered at certain times in his life like that. He was really mad, and I thought, oh boy, if one of them police stop us, he's in trouble. We're all in trouble, you know. But we made it, and so that always stuck in my mind, you know, to be refused food because of the color of your skin is wrong. And so I think that's really what, I don't know, some people say my opinions are strong, but it made me stronger. Instead of making me weak, it made me strong. So I took a negative, made it to a positive. And so from that day on, I was always a human rights advocate because I know what had been done to me. When I got older, I looked back on my life and I realized that there were things that were negative, but because of the way I was raised and taught, I turned them into positives. I went from the 6th grade, top of the class, went to the 7th grade, and the teacher we had was an orchard owner, so she just saw a cherry picker. I went from top of the class to the bottom and was passed conditionally. But as time went on, it made me angry, and I fought back, but that fighting back made me stronger, and it give me the will not to fail. I said, well, I'm not going to be unemployed all my life. And the worst scenario I could imagine would be sitting by a former main highway. The expressway is 10 miles away, and here's a guy sitting in his dusty windowed business hoping somebody will stop. No, I can't do that either. I have to look at what's out there. I have to look at the world. And so I was very fortunate to be able to understand the world as it is in its complexity and where I can fit in. And again, it came from healthy living. It came from getting away from alcohol addiction, tobacco addiction, all those things that advertising causes us to do. And once you get that, then your healthy lifestyle begins to open up. And you begin to find people who are willing to come along and help. People who are willing to listen, to say, you know, I think you have value because of the way you live. You have a job. You've got an education enough to help you in your life. You maintain a certain family style, lifestyle. And your credibility to the rest of the world and humanity is greatly enhanced. But if you're a person that can't live that way and figure it out, you've got some problems. It's like right now they're talking about barriers to employment to get a job. And what it comes down to, the part they don't address, they talk about education and training, but they fail to look at a person's mental and physical health. Did they eat good today? Are their teeth strong? Are their eyes strong? Are their lungs clear? Are they able to breathe and move freely? And so there's a lot of people, in order to help them in their lives, they have to be pointed out, lifestyles, how to live, how you're going to look at things. And once that happens, it does make a difference. But getting to there is the journey that's the hardest. And you know that old saying, each journey starts with the first step. Well, the first step you've got to take. And usually that first step is self-admittance of what is not right. Because we all know right from wrong. We know what's wrong, what we're doing. We know what's right. And like that, I say the person that says, I don't feel good unless I'm helping somebody. Well, good. That's the right way to live. Not this, I'm so full of myself, I'm not going to help anybody. It's all for me. I do everything for me. Boy, that's really hard to figure that out. I had a guy tell me that one time, and I said, what about your children? When they get 18, I'm kicking them out. I said, are you sure? Yes. And I said, well, where I come from, you leave when you think you're ready. Well, what if you're never ready to leave? I said, sometimes you never leave. I said, I've seen families like that. Well, that's just because minorities and poor people do that. I said, no. I said, have you heard of the Kennedys? Well, yeah. I said, they live in a compound. All of them. I said, maybe they pool all their money. That's why they're so rich. So I said, leaving home is a good thing. But in other times, not leaving home can be a good thing too. So depends upon, how you use it, how you take it. So lifestyle and a healthy lifestyle is, as you can see, is based on a lot of different things that we're going to have to address as people, as we grow up. As children, we can do it. It's relatively easy because we haven't overcommitted ourselves to any one thing. We've committed ourselves to how our family raises us. But as we go out to school, we begin to know who the bad boys are and who the good boys are. We know certain behavior is expected. Maintaining at least a passing grade is expected. And when you get older, you realize that that's how society judges us. Education is America's passport. And the more of those passport sheets you can get, such as degrees, the more freedom you'll have to move within the system. The more money you acquire, the more freedom you have. But again, you don't want to make that your whole religion and your whole purpose of life, because money isn't everything. Because money can't buy happiness. Money can't buy back your health that you've ruined through excesses. And so you realize that money is like a tool. And if you use it properly, everybody can benefit. If you share it. Because the first law of being Anishinaabe is sharing. That's the first law of survival, sharing. And that's what has gotten us through as Anishinaabe all this time, is we learn to share. We learn to share philosophy, thought, food, clothing, everything. And once you're sharing and you get into that part of your life that becomes part of your life, it makes a big difference. I retired. I worked for the state of Michigan for a number of years. And I finally retired, and people, what are you going to do now? You're going to do this, you're going to do that. Yeah, I'll do that. But I've not given up serving the community. I'm on boards. I do other things. Somebody says, can you help us with this? Sure, I'll do that. What about this? Can you come and do that? Yeah, I'll do that. Because that ensures not only my survivability, but those in the future. Because the knowledge and the energy you share with that group, they in turn take energy from it. They in turn speak to somebody else and share it. And so it just multiplies constantly. But if you withdraw and you sit back and you say, well, I'm going to take it easy from now on, boy, you're not sharing your knowledge or wisdom or strength that you acquired through other people through your life. I think the worst thing you can do is become so egocentric to yourself and your people, is that you fail to recognize the contributions of other people that helped you in your life. One of the writers, American writers, made a statement, no man is an island. And we aren't. I've heard people, I'm a self-made man. Oh, yeah? Then who created you? Oh, you weren't self-made. You had a mother and a father. Okay. And how long did they change your diapers and feed you and take care of you? Self-made man. And the guy told me, well, you know what I mean. He said, I've earned my own way the hard way, and I've done it that way. And I said, I admire you for that. But I said, think about the people that contributed to that. Think of the bosses that maybe tolerated your negative behavior when something should have been said or could have been said. And I said, that car you get in to go to work, you paid for that, didn't you? Yep. I said, but who made it? What about all those people in the factory that made that automobile so that you could ride in to be a self-made man? And so when you look at it, we're all part of that whole mosaic. And certainly we do things that set us aside as individuals. But by the same token, what you're doing is to benefit other people. You can tell stories, you can make movies, you can do all kinds of things. But those ideas came from some place. And so I go back, and even those teachers that were negative to me, I think about them a lot. Every now and then I'll say, yeah, I'm glad you were a little mean to me, because that just made my back get up just a little bit tougher. It made me tougher. It made me able to survive. And so those contributions we get make for a healthy lifestyle. And if we can do that and go through life and think about all those gifts that were given us and treat them as gifts and honor them, that'll change. And then you can look at yourself and say, all right, I think, boy, I better not be eating beef steak 5 meals out of a week. Maybe I ought to mix it with some fish and some chicken. If you're fortunate enough to have wild game, supplement it with that. But we also have to be careful of how we eat. We need to get back to growing our own food. But we should be able to grow our own potatoes or tomatoes, whatever vegetables we eat, and not use chemicals. There are ways we can grow plants and food without chemicalization of them. Because again, we put the chemical in the plant, it comes out in us. And so there's a movement for ecologically sound management of food growing without pesticides, without insecticides. I had a great uncle who taught me that. He grew potatoes. Well, you should spray DDT on it, get rid of those bugs. He said, no, I'll pick them off. And then he said to somebody, you want some bait to go fishing with? And so he had bait for him to go fishing with. And so we need to begin to look and say, how the gift of life we're given, how are we giving that back? How are we ensuring our healthy survival? How many books do we read, or what do we read from the computer? How do we use that knowledge that we get? Do we share it? Because our obligation is to share all the knowledge that we acquire. There was a man that passed away, and I know people have said it, but they said when this man passed away, a library died with him. Well, that's kind of sad, because maybe he shared it, or maybe he didn't. And that would be the sad part. That would be the tragedy if he didn't share that information. But I think the man you spoke of, they certainly did. And so we have all these obligations as we grow up. If you're the oldest child in a group of kids playing, you're responsible. That's how we were raised. I waited to the day I could be in charge. I saw my cousin Sonny, and Russell or Bussy, and my brother all in charge. Well, my turn came. Boy, I waited for that. Well, my cousin George had new shoes on. We ended up walking through the creek and getting them all muddy, and us kids were kind of snickering behind our hands that George was going to get it when we got home. I got it too. Worse than he did, because I was to be watching him. That was my responsibility. And so you see it even in children, that a leader will rise out of a group of kids, and to watch those kids. You can put up food, candy, everything. And a kid might go for the candy first, but eventually they're going to eat what's best for them without being coached. And so we have that innate wisdom in us to make the right choices. But with television and advertising and even video games, we let them influence our lives. A human life is nothing on a video game. They're constantly shooting, cutting off heads, kicking, running cars, running over people, doing all kinds of things. And that filters into your way of thinking, and that's not a good way to think. And so we have to moderate that. You and I know that it's not reality, But to a young mind, it's hard to distinguish what that reality is. Is that real life? I had a grandnephew look at a picture one time. He was 4 years old. He saw a picture of these poor black children in the South. And I watched him. He was looking at that picture. Kept looking at that. And finally he looks at me. He called me Uncle Jonk. He says, Uncle Jonk, is that real life? I said, yes, it is. Oh, boy. You could see the wheels turning. He's looking at them poor people. And so our young kids, we know what's right. We know what's wrong. We can understand it. But we let things cloud us. We let our food make bad decisions for us. Yeah, okay, well, I'm going to eat at McDonald's for 4 days in a row, or I'm going to have pizza 3 nights in a row. I'm going to have some takeout. No, learn to cook your own food. It's not hard to make scrambled eggs, especially if you've got a local farm that has eggs that haven't been laid by chickens that live in cages their whole life. We jokingly call them sulfur bullets, because when you break them open, they have a sulfur smell, and that's the feed they gave them. So you begin to look and say, we have to make healthy choices in our food, the way we live, the way we think, and let us not be a product of our addictions. Let us control it. It's like alcohol. We have people who are sent away all the time to these treatment centers. And one of them is in the Upper Peninsula, and I said, well, in order to be fully cured, when they go to that treatment center, I think everybody should take on a Indian name. Oh, what's that? Gotta want to quit. And so, they'll treat you, but again, it's up to the individual. It's like AA has a program, and they'll take you through 12 steps. And then they give you a card that says, God, grant me the strength. Well, I tell those folks, God had nothing to do with you taking that first drink. Therefore, God has nothing to do with you taking that last drink. It's all inside. It's all in your heart and your head. And if you want to quit, you will quit, and you can quit. But don't lie to yourself and say, I want to quit, while you're reaching for something else to drink, alcoholic beverage. Or you're lighting up a cigarette and saying, I want to quit. You have to understand that it's up to you as the individual to have that strength. It's like, I said, well, why am I an alcoholic? Let me see. My mother drank for a certain amount. My dad once in a blue moon. My grandparents not at all. My grandparents on that side did not drink at all. The great-grandparents and the great-great-grandparents. So I didn't inherit any defective gene that says I can't tolerate alcohol. What I did is I chose to go that road. So I choose not to walk it anymore. And I didn't use a 12-step program. I didn't use a treatment center. I sat on my picnic table and watched the sunset and thought about what I did and said. And when I decided to quit drinking, I was at the point where they say you have shakes and DTs and hallucinations and all of those things. But I'd made my mind up even before I quit drinking that I wasn't going to do those things. And so when I quit and said I'm quitting, that didn't happen to me. Then they say, oh, you got to change friends, you got to change settings. No, I continue to go to the bars where my friends were. They drank. Some of them say, well, what, you think you're better than us? And I'd say, yes, I am. Yeah, I am, because I'm not drinking. But go ahead. That's what you want. You go ahead, but I'm not. And so I didn't abandon the people that I was around, because I realized they, again, were a product of their addiction. And it had nothing to do with me. But I know I could help. And so I shared with other people, and some of them did quit drinking. One guy put it this way, well, if you can quit, I know I can. And he did. And he was always proud of the fact. And he let people know. He said, yeah, it was John Bailey. got me started. He shared with me how he did it, and by golly, he said it worked. And so, it's up to us as individuals to realize how healthy we're going to live, what road we're going to take, how we're going to help others, and how we're going to control ourselves in our daily lives, from getting up in the morning to what happens all day and going to bed at night. And like an elder told me, always trust your tobacco when you pray. When you're praying, put your faith in that tobacco. Make sure that if you're putting tobacco out and you're saying, gee whiz, we want the weather to be such and such, or we're hoping the weather, trust that tobacco, trust that feeling, and understand it. And that's the biggest thing that I would say to anybody is learning to trust. Trust in yourself, trust in your family, community, and trust your tobacco. And make sure you pray. St. Antler's Day is coming up November 15th. So I'm going hunting, and we were taught that when we go to the woods, we offer tobacco and we pray. And then we go hunt that animal. And if we're fortunate enough to get food, we pray again, we offer tobacco, and we give thanks. And you let that animal lay there for a while. Let that soul make that transition. Then when you know it's right, you'll go over there and you start your work on it. And when you bring it back, I'm always careful not to, look what I did. No, I bring it and I make sure I share it with people. I don't keep the best part for myself. I share that. Share everything with people. And then I take the leather and I make different things, and I keep the leather. And a young man my nephew needed leather for a dance outfit. I said, hey, I got 2 hides right here. There you go. Another relative needed moccasins for dance outfit. I said, hey, I got a pair right here. Smoked elk hide. Good ones. And so you share those things. And once you begin to share, your lifestyle changes. And again, you come back and you honor that Asemaa. You honor that cedar and that sage and the sweetgrass, and you give thanks for them. And so every time you pray and that smoke comes up from here into the air, that Asemaa, that's what it's for. That smoke is to carry your prayers and to distribute that smoke all around all these birds and the plants. So they're part of that prayer too. And that's what it's about.